With me is the Foreign Secretary of Lithuania. We know that there has been increased engagement between the Indian side and the Lithuanian side. So my first question to you is, and first let me welcome you here in Delhi. And my first question to you is, how do you see the India-Lithuania relationship? It has been growing. There has been increased engagement. Where do you see the relationship going forward?
Well, thanks for this question. First of all, I'm happy to be back to India, which is very close to my heart. Spent my 5 years of professional working here in New Delhi. So we see this trend as positive one. That's the generalistic evaluation. We are happy of how this trend is ongoing. The Indian diplomatic mission, opened in Vilnius last year. It was long awaited, so now it has given institutional stability for our bilateral relations. We see trade growing both ways when it comes to imports from India and now exports from Lithuania to India. People-to-people contacts are growing. This year we celebrate 400 years of first Lithuanian arriving in India, so it's also another milestone in giving certain framework of how deep our relationship is. Not mentioning Sanskrit, which is a key part, I think, of how we perceive each other, and this warmth of relationship comes from. So from this situation as we stand now, what are the next potential avenues? Yes, commercial and trade engagement is one thing. European Union is now actively discussing with India possibility of concluding free trade agreement. That would be a positive thing for Lithuania as well, and Lithuanian companies in particular. We discussed during my meetings in New Delhi about the possibility of setting up a commission on scientific and technological cooperation. This is an area which is experiencing interest on both sides. We know that India has much to offer, but Lithuania too has a very vibrant community when it comes to biotechnologies, fintechs, and IT, space, including space. So how to give this activities that already taking place some institutional framework that would stabilize that relationship, give it a long-term planning perspective. Maybe Commission could help that. So we are opening this chapter for discussion. And increasing people-to-people contacts, which we believe is always a founding principle of bilateral relations. So those anniversaries is a good way also to declare or announce the year 2025, 2026 as people-to-people year between India and Lithuania. That's our proposal that was extended to officials in New Delhi.
So looking towards quite a substantive relationship, but it's the Sanskrit Connect that has caught the imagination in several ways. There was recently release of a dictionary as well. If you can perhaps talk about the Sanskrit Connect, and I know many of your diplomats, including the ambassador, speaks very nice and beautiful Hindi as well.
Well, that's true. I mean, 8 generations of Lithuanians grew on the idea that Sanskrit and Lithuanian are closely interconnected, and this is linguistically proven fact that those two languages have common roots. This dictionary that you mentioned was an attempt to show how close our languages are, because it collected 106 words which are understandable, easily understandable for contemporary Lithuanian language speaker or contemporary Hindi language speaker. So even though Sanskrit is 2,000, 3,000 years of written Sanskrit already here, and more Lithuanian was never a written language until 16th century. So with that historical context in mind, that we still can understand each other, shows that this relationship is really vibrant. And also it covers many aspects of life. I mean, it's not only about religion, it's not about the phenomena of nature, it also concerns many things we use in our daily life. Of course, the life of the past, which was agricultural one. So, but you have these connections very visibly in there.
So now moving towards your region, we have seen a war in Ukraine. In last 24 hours, there have been developments. The conversation happening between the Russian president and the U.S. president. Announcement of a partial ceasefire as well. What is Lithuania's take on the developments which have happened in last 24 hours? How do you see it as key to your security as well?
Well, this war of aggression against Ukraine was started by Russia, and I believe every one of us understands very clearly the easiest way. It's very easy and simple to end this war. That Russia stops its attacks on Ukraine. So it's one switch, one command, one order from Putin to his generals, and the war is over. Since we are not in this situation, we have to find other ways of how to mitigate the conflict, the killings. So there is a progress in that regard, a very limited one. I think what we saw yesterday was below the expectations, at least in our region, and in a way in the line of what could we have predicted, knowing how Russia behaves in bilateral and multinational negotiations. Russia always wants everything for herself and very little, if anything, to the other part at the table. So our goal here now is to make Ukraine strong, to help Ukraine defend herself, and most importantly, that whatever deal is concluded, in the end, it is compatible, is in line with the principles of international law. Because if we cut this line short, there will be no security for countries in general, and especially small nations like Lithuania in particular.
But are you hopeful of a larger ceasefire, a ceasefire that can come into effect very soon? Are you hopeful on that?
Well, everyone wants this war to end. I mean, there's hardly anyone who would deliberately want this war to continue, probably except President Putin and his command. But again, the deal should not put Ukraine, which is already a victim, in an even weaker position, because that would mean this deal will not be sustainable. It will be an invitation for another attack, and that attack would probably happen sooner rather than later.
So my last question to you is, how do you see India's role in terms of the war in Ukraine? The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been to Moscow. He has met with President Putin and told him that this is not an era of war. The Indian Prime Minister has been to Kyiv as well, provided humanitarian support to the Ukrainians as well. Engagements happening both sides. So how do you see the Indian position, and would you be keen that there should be more increase in India engaging and perhaps bringing peace?
Well, those visits you mentioned were important because they changed the configuration of narrative at that particular moment. And the narrative before that was that so-called global South or global partners were disengaged, and they were not caring enough about what is happening in this corner of Europe. So India has a role and India has a voice. That's our line to stress while being here in New Delhi. India has a voice, and that voice does matter. And so make that voice pronounced, make that voice heard is essential. And the voice of India, I can build on my experience of working here and on also of long-term relationship that we have. That voice of India is in full alignment of principles of international law. We can hardly imagine a situation that India would really support forceful territorial acquisitions or the undermining sovereignty of another independent state.
Ending the interview with perhaps a cultural aspect. Do you do yoga? Do you speak Hindi? You've been here in India as well. Any aspect of India's cultural identity adopted by you or many of the Lithuanians?
Well, all of that is part of my life, but with language is a thing that once you don't practice it, it's becoming less and less prominent in your life. मैं बोलते थे हिंदी.
Thank you so much, sir, for making that attempt. But India-Lithuania relationship is growing clearly, and it has a lot of potential. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to WION.
बहुत धन्यवाद, बहुत धन्यवाद.
With video journalist Ajit Sidhant Sibal for WION in New Delhi.